There are now two civil wars going on at once in the Morrison government. And today, well, one of those got even worse as panic is now setting in with the polls looking so bad and the election 2 months away. In the first war, the Liberals are being attacked by the people who used to lead them until just 7 months ago. That's former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and former Deputy Liberal leader Julie Bishop. And now the Liberals' partners in government, the Nationals, they're being split by their former leader, Barnaby Joyce, who says he's ready to take over again from lacklustre leader now, Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister. Joyce and 6 Queensland Nationals, they want the government to back a new coal-fired power station to increase the electricity supply and bring down prices. But the Liberals and Nationals from more urban electorates down south, they don't want this debate, not just before the New South Wales state election in a couple of weeks and the federal election in a couple of months. They are terrified of voters who think that we should do more about global warming. So, Barnaby Joyce today got some serious blowback, starting with New South Wales Nationals leader John Barilaro.
We just want them to shut up. We just want them to be quiet, stop talking about themselves. Right now, we're fighting for survival in New South Wales. We've got some of the toughest seats to win. We really are. In some of our seats, it's 50-50.
And the Deputy Leader of the Federal Nationals, Victorian Bridget McKenzie, she was just as cross with Barnaby Joyce.
What Barnaby Joyce is saying publicly is very different to what the party room is saying.
Joining me is the panel, Liberal Senator James Paterson and Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching. Thank you so much to you both. Barnaby Joyce knows he's hurting the government. The 6 Queensland Nationals know they're hurting the government by bringing all this up now. Why do you think they're doing it?
Well, I certainly take John Barilaro's advice to hand, and I'll be limited in what I have to say, Andrew. One thing that I did want to reflect on, though, is a comment was made yesterday about the entitlement to the Deputy Prime Ministership, and I think there's nothing more corrosive to our standing as politicians with the public than the use of words like entitled to a position of public office. And frankly, in the case of a Westminster system, it's just wrong. No one is elected at the election to a position other than as a Member of Parliament for their local
You're referring to Barnaby Joyce's words yesterday, where he said, I was elected Deputy Prime Minister by the public, which he wasn't, and sort of making out like it was entitled to the job.
We are all only elected to the positions of our representative roles as a local member or senator, and any other position we obtain, it is due to the confidence and trust of our colleagues, which we have to earn and continue to earn. And if we ever lose their trust and confidence, well, then we lose that exalted position as well. No one is entitled to it by virtue of an election or anything else.
Now, obviously, James does not want to make this worse by speculating about motives. I'll ask you, Kimberley. It's going to be a free kick, try to be measured. It seems to me that the reason Barnaby Joyce and those Queensland Nats are picking this fight now, when it's going to be disastrous for the Liberals, is that they actually want to cut the Liberals loose. They want to put some distance and say, look, we're not them. We've got our own agenda, which you'd like. We're not part of this. We're not going down with the ship.
Well, of course, they've got the additional problem in Queensland that they're merged, so it's the LNP in Queensland. But I think that this is all about electoral success or failure. And I think that there's a real split, I think, within the Nationals in what they believe. So I guess north in the country and those in the south. And
it's every man for himself now.
Every man and woman for him or her. Of course, I don't have many women, but every man for himself. And I think that you know, what we're seeing is kind of the wheels have really fallen off. I mean, it's just. I went to Shepparton recently, Andrew, and I can tell you that they are not representing the people that they once represented. So the issues that are raised.
It's a low point.
They used to be for the battler in the bush. They are not that anymore.
Well, I might say, well, I'll get on to whether Labor represents battlers too. But first, the Prime Minister today seemed to realise that Michael McCormack, the Nationals leader, needs some help in building his profile, which has gone nowhere in the last year. He gave him a new nickname today. Have a listen.
Can I start particularly by welcoming Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister, here today. Please, again. No one knew better than Sir Robert Menzies the importance of the coalition partnership to deliver good government for Australia. I can tell you that ScoMo and Big Mac over here...
Big Mac. Have you ever heard Michael McCormick called Big Mac before?
No, Andrew, I haven't, but I like it. Big Mac, Mac Dog, Mac Daddy, I don't mind.
Do we get fries with that or not? I mean...
Oh, my God.
On the substantive point, perhaps, Andrew...
that's a marketing thing. I don't like it.
No, I think ScoMo's just kind of being colloquial.
Oh, and now you give me ScoMo.
Well, but people like that. I mean, he's not putting himself on a pedestal. He doesn't think he's someone so much better than anyone else just due to the position he holds. He's not the kind of guy who expects to be called Prime Minister every time you see him in the corridor. He's actually very relatable. He's actually a pretty ordinary bloke. He's got a mortgage. He's got a family. He's got daughters. He's an ordinary bloke.
Look, I like that. I like his optimism. I'm talking now about Scott Morrison and his politeness. I mean, in fact, it's really quite interesting for all the abuse flying around on Twitter and everything, everyone speaking in F words and whatever. I find one thing that no one ever says, Bill Shorten and Scott Morrison are conducting themselves very civilly vis-a-vis one another, I think. And so you remember when Malcolm Turnbull was going around about how... Bill Shorten was a sycophant and sickening and all that. You're not hearing this kind of talk.
I don't think that Malcolm Turnbull is anyone we could hold up to the light in how he has behaved, certainly post-leadership. But I think going back to the marketing tool of giving people nicknames, I mean, it's a bit cringeworthy, and I thought that was a pretty cringeworthy moment. And I just don't think... I understand what James is saying. He's this relatable person, but which I'm not really sure whether that washes either. But I think that by doing this, it sort of reeks of desperation.
But I also think we need a little bit of dignity in the office. I mean, you do need to say that is the Prime Minister, that is the Deputy Prime Minister, and hopefully hold people up to a standard they've got to reach for.
Can I just say, so there's a very interesting article by Sean Kelly where one of his colleagues says that Scott Morrison is aggressively suburban. And I feel when I read that, I thought that is actually probably quite accurate. And I think there is a certain level of aggression in that speech as well. There's a certain level of,
suburban. I think that feels
pushing
sounds like Labor is now
please
feeling...
accept me in this way.
Andrew,
and he's just not
he
that...
is in that way.
And in the Prime Minister's speech today, he talked about his summer holidays. He was down in the New South Wales coast in a small regional town. He and his family were out kayaking. They went to the pub. They had fish and chips. He's someone who's naturally in his element in places like that. I've been out in the community with the Prime Minister, and people do relate to him. In an age where, frankly, as a political class, we don't have a lot of respect or a lot of affection out there in the community, people think Scott Morrison is a decent bloke having a go.
I think he's conducting himself in very difficult circumstances with great dignity. I have to say that, great dignity and good humour. Although, I disagree with the policies he's choosing and the tack he's taking, but in terms of personal dignity, I think that is good. I'd just like him to live up to the name a little bit of Prime Minister, that's all. But you said the Liberals have given up on the battler. I want to ask you about this. Labor promises to cut our global warming emissions by 45% over the next decade. And we're not just talking about power stations, by the way. We're talking about cars, we're talking about farming, we're talking about all sorts of things as well as... But when it comes to just power stations, independent expert modelling by former government scientist Brian Fisher, he said this would require closing 9 of the 17 coal-fired power stations we'd have left in just a decade. And how the hell are you going to do that?
You and I have had this discussion on the program and, in person. And I think that what we're seeing now is that the market itself has moved to support renewables. So in Palo Alto, billions of dollars is being invested by venture capitalists in renewables and technology for renewables. So no one is saying that venture capitalists are these warm and fuzzy people who are investing for the good of anyone else. They're investing to get a return. So that is where the market itself has moved.
Yeah, I think it's wrong to talk about the market, isn't it, James? Because the market is actually desperately rigged because consumers are forced by the government to use the product of these solar and wind farms.
Andrew, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine any market which is less free than the energy market. It is the most regulated, most interfered with, most subsidised market around. I mean, when we talk about energy policy in this country and people say that what we have is a result of market failure, I don't think that could be any further from the truth. It's regulatory failure, and I'm happy to say, you know, on this program and next to Kimberley, a bipartisan regulatory failure of over a decade that has caused the problems that we have today, that this government is in the process of trying to unwind. But it is not market failure, it's regulatory failure.
That's exactly right. I mean, the reason that Brian Fisher says these coal-fired power stations go out of business is because of your policy. He says, well, the Liberal policies are pretty bad too when it comes to cutting emissions, but yours are worse. They'll close fewer power stations than you will.
So what we will see, so firstly we've had 4 energy policies from this government since they've been elected.
Don't worry about yours. Yeah, yours is a granddaddy of them all. Closing power stations, that's going to cause power shortages, isn't it?
Well, that is part of the scare campaign that the current government would have people believe. And what I would
Brian
say
Fisher is a former Hawke Keating advisor, and he said it's going to cost the economy $470 billion or $9,000 per person. I mean, this is economy-wrecking stuff.
No, it's, look, oh my God, that is, James, you know that is scaremongering, and you know that this government, because
From
it doesn't...
From a former Hawke Keating advisor? It's not my words.
Yes, but, well, you have just said that, oh, you know, the sky's going to fall in.
No, I haven't said that. I said it's going to smash the economy by $470 billion, as Brian Fisher's found.
That when you get the technology right for renewables, guess what? The sun and the wind are free. So at the end of the day, the power bills will come down.
They're not.
They are going to come down. So in
Sunlight
Taiwan,
is free, but converting it to electricity and then having a backup when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow.
That is why I am telling you that once that storage capacity comes online, and I was in the Pilbara at the end of last year, and there is a plant there that is moving entirely to solar. Okay. Why wouldn't you in the Pilbara? It's sunny.
But one reason, the transmission costs from the Pilbara will be enormous.
And what I would say to you is that not only has the market, but the Australian people have moved to, they want renewables. They want new renewables, but they also want lower power prices. Raised with me in Shepparton was about climate change.
They want...
It was a constant topic.
I know, because the Liberals have abandoned the argument. The public want renewables because I think it feels good. They also want lower power prices. The time will come when they will realise they cannot have both, and that will be your time. And I think you'll find the Labor Party is in all sorts of trouble then. By the way, quickly, former Labor leader Mark Latham, now the New South Wales One Nation leader, says this party wants to introduce laws so that if you're claiming some benefit on the basis of being Aboriginal, you've got to have a DNA test and you've got to show that 25% of your ancestry is Aboriginal. It's not going to happen, but should it happen?
No, it shouldn't, Andrew. And I have to say my libertarian alarm bells are going off here. The government is going to collect citizens' DNA in order to determine their race. I mean, I can't think of anything more disturbing than that. I think there's a really dangerous and dark path to go down.
You don't think there's a concern that he's trying to address?
Well, what he's trying to address is a principled issue, which is, should we have welfare which is in part based on people's race or ethnicity? Now, that's not a controversial topic to broach, but the way he's chosen to do it, I think, is very controversial.
Your former leader.
Well, in the Latham diaries, which I have in my... I would have brought it in, Andrew, but it's on my shelf in Canberra marked cautionary tales. He actually says in there that, you know, there was a shadow cabinet meeting that was discussed about, being nasty about Indigenous Australians, and he said that these people who are suggesting this are opportunistic, and it's a rubbish way. So he actually decries it then, but now, of course, he's using it. Why? Because he's got relevance deprivation syndrome.
Oh, well, maybe he's just seen the light. I don't know. Look, maybe I've got to go. I'm sorry. That's a good point. Kimberley, Kitching, James Paterson, thank you both so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
More after the break.